please.
Councilor Graney?
Here.
Councilor Camardo?
Here.
Councilor Smith?
Here.
Councilor Zika?
Here.
Mayor Quill.
Here. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You remain standing for a moment of silent prayer reflection. Thank you. Please be seated. Start out with our public to be heard, and clerk, if you would read our rules and regulations.
At this time, we will open the public to be heard portion of our council meeting. As a reminder, and pursuant to City Council rules of procedure, prior to addressing council, speakers are asked to state their name, address, and affiliation, if any. All comments should be addressed to the entire council and not to individual staff members. Your remarks must be limited to 3 minutes and concern only issues involving the City Council, city government, or matters of general city concern. Issues involving specific employees of the city should be directed to the city manager outside of this meeting, and all speakers before council should observe commonly accepted rules of courtesy. Personal attacks and abusive language will be ruled out of order.
Thank you. This time, is there anyone desiring to be heard? Sir.
Yes, good evening. Kevin Cox, 127 Genesee Street. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Copies of a letter here that I just want to distribute. The addressing. The letter addresses the theater project, and specifically some comments made by Mr. Fusco in the Citizen newspaper today. Specifically, Mr. Fusco said that he'd yet to see any comments about a mitigation plan as of Wednesday afternoon, but there's a letter dated October 17, 2013 that was sent to the council, and I have additional copies here. I'd like to distribute those as well. There are multiple attachments to the letter. You should have those already, but I'm just providing additional copies of the letter itself. Obviously, you know, it's my position that the city couldn't possibly vote on anything tonight without having first reviewed that letter, all its attachments, and fully considered all the issues that are raised. And it didn't appear as though that were the case from Mr. Fusco's comments. Number two, Mr. Fusco addressed Judge Polito's decision and his interpretation of that being that that the city, all they had to do was address the ground vapor barrier and its condition negative deck. But we disagree with that. I don't think that's accurate for one reason. The appellate division found specifically that the possibility of contaminants on the property and the need to modify the proposed action so that no significant adverse environmental impacts will result. So putting down the vapor barrier, installing the depressurization unit will not mitigate the possibility of contaminants on the property. The city, at this point, has no knowledge of the source of those contaminants and nor the extent of the contamination on the property. Such any attempts at this point to mitigate without first testing the soil and the water would be meaningless. State Street. Mr. Fusco indicated that in his interpretation of Judge Polito's decision that Judge Polito gave his blessing, I guess, to ingress and egress. But I would point the council to page 8 of Judge Polito's decision when he specifically stated that the issue still has to be looked at. And the city did not take a hard look at this issue prior to the issuance of the condition negative deck. And I'd also point out, as I have previously, that the state fire code in very black and white language specifically states that you have to have 26 feet of unobstructed access for an aerial fire apparatus road for any building that's above 30 feet. So, and there's no exceptions to that. There's no way around that. We've heard folks from the city and from the county saying that they've looked at it and they're happy with what's there, but nobody's addressed that issue head on. Does it or doesn't it comply with the state fire code? And the answer to that is no, it doesn't. Any building?
I'd ask you to wrap it up, please, sir.
Okay. Any building above 30 feet has to have 26 foot of unobstructed access. to allow for an aerial fire apparatus to come in there and put out the fire.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else desiring to be heard this evening?
Hi, my name is Kim Pearson. I'm on 12 State Street. My husband and I own Nash's, and I know you guys have missed me coming, and I'm back again, and I hope that I don't come back again. So I wanted to address the Schwartz Family Performing Arts Center. As a merchant and property owner, we strongly urge the passage of this so this project can continue on. The thought of having an additional 300 to 400 people on the streets when the theater is open is just a win situation for everybody. It's going to increase income from taxes, people purchasing and supporting businesses in downtown. But on another note, I believe that you have all received a copy of a petition that a few of us volunteers approached the chamber and asked them if they would sponsor, and in approximately 30 days we got over 1,000 signatures, which encompassed a wide variety of people from city residents, county residents, New York State residents, and people from many other locations that are in support of this project. I think one of the things that also I noticed was that the Callett family are strongly, at least the peoples that responded, are strongly in favor of this project proceeding. I hope that I understand that there are obstacles that come, but I firmly believe that the city, the college that will be building the theater are going to figure out a way to overcome these. I'm not concerned about the fire, and we have a building on that street, and we don't have any question that if there's a fire on that street, the fire department will come and will have access. We watch them. I watch the fire truck come down the streets. I watch them extend everything and fully be able to, in my opinion, fight that fire. I think that I want Auburn to be known more than the home of Copper John. We advertise ourselves as history's hometown. I think we should make new history by constructing the Schwartz Family Performing Arts Center and making Auburn the musical theater center of upstate New York. So I hope that you can find in support of building the theater. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else this evening?
My name is Dave Arnold, President of the Cayuga County Labor Council. We have endorsed this project right along, and we will continue to endorse this project. One of the main things being is the diversity of money-making propositions within the city, which the city seems to be worried about tax base. This will only help increase the tax base and the sales tax coming into the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Anyone else?
Good evening, Ron Quill, Case Avenue. I'm also the chairman, or the advisory board chairman for Salvation Army. In just over a month, we'll be serving turkey again up to Salvation Army up on 18 East Genesee Street. Once again, I ask the residents of the area to donate turkeys so we can feed people. Seems though that there'll be more and more people out there, and their income doesn't allow them to have a good meal. So we're very willing to be able to give the people a good meal for Thanksgiving. And Mr. Graney and Mr. Davis are on the board here with me. And they remember last year how we filled the clamshells for takeout. We had a hard time getting the covers closed. We feel that the meal that we give them shouldn't be just for one meal. It should be able to be just like the meal you have at Thanksgiving, where you've got leftovers. You can make sandwiches either that evening or the next day. So everyone is welcome to show up for the meal. We have a meal at the facility. We also have takeouts. If you are looking to have a takeout, please get a hold of our office between about 8 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so we get an idea as far as the number we have to have, how many turkeys I got to cook. The other thing, too, is within less than a month, you're going to see our people from Salvation Army, different organizations out there with the kettle drive starting. Seems like we just finished this a little while ago and we're right back at it. The money that comes in from the kettle drive are used right here in our community. We don't turn around and send half of it to the national or the state or something of that order. We send a very, very small percentage, and that actually comes back to us in different ways. So the other thing, too, is please, if you know someone that would like to have a meal for Thanksgiving, you know they're not going to be able to get a meal, please let us know. We can work out either you come in and pick it up for them and give it to them, or we may very well be able to do some delivery to people. We do that on a regular basis. We have quite a few people that come in on Thanksgiving and help us, and they're willing to go out and deliver one meal or two meals at a time if it's necessary. So please, ask those people if they would like a meal. They shouldn't be embarrassed if they come in for a meal or come in and eat with us, or we give them the meal because the people in this community are the ones that support that meal. They're the ones that give us the turkeys and the potatoes and the squash and everything that we use for Thanksgiving. Everything is homemade. I usually start the Friday before cooking, so it's a labor of love, and we really enjoy it. So please, thank you.
Waited my entire life for that. You went over. Is there anyone else desiring to be heard?
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Andrew Fish. I'm the Executive Director of the Cayuga County Chamber of Commerce and the Cayuga Economic Development Agency. A little while ago, you heard Ms. Pearson talk about the petition that we recently sponsored about 3 weeks ago. What I'm passing around to you is two documents. One is a list of comments that were made. We've highlighted some that we felt were significant, but there are many more there to be read. I believe there's 19 pages of comments. In addition to that, you have all 1,152 signatures on that petition, the people that signed them and where they're from. Give you a little demographic on it. There was 1,152 signatures, 895 from New York State, 705 from Central New York, and 475 from the city of Auburn. The overwhelming support for this petition was quite surprising. We put it out there 3 weeks ago not knowing what to expect. We sent out an email to our members and we put it on Facebook, and that's about all we did. Those two initiatives, social media and our constant contact. And we watched the numbers climb pretty quickly. We weren't really sure what to expect. We hoped we'd get 1,000, and we did go past that, and actually since these were printed earlier today, we're up to 1,159. The petition is still growing. People are still signing it. The reason why we did this and the reason why we brought this forward is we want you to see that there is tremendous support behind this. There are always concerns with projects whenever you move forward, but to the point now we feel like things are being obstructionary, and this is something that will benefit our community, will benefit this city, and will benefit Cayuga County as a whole, and we want to see this move forward. We believe that all of the due diligence has been done, that the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and it's time to move forward with this project, and we support it, as do the 1,152 people that signed our petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fish. Is there anyone else? If not, we'll close the portion of our meeting. Council, this time I'll entertain a motion for the approval of meeting minutes from October 3rd. Councilor Camardo, seconded by Councilor Rozika. Discussion? Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Councilor Grady?
Yes.
Councilor Camardo?
Yes.
Councilor Smith?
Aye.
Councilor Rozika?
Yes.
Aye.
Carried.
Presentations and proclamations. Doug, would you like to introduce your guest here this evening?
Yes, Mayor. It's been probably 6 or 8 weeks ago, I sent around some information to the council about something new in the area of water, wastewater operations, and that's concessionaire agreements. And some of you expressed interest in learning a little bit more about that. So this evening, Mark Phillips and Bill Ames are here from United Water, and I'll let them introduce themselves and give you some background on this concessionaire agreement option.
Thank you. Well, good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for inviting us to be here this evening. My name is Mark Phillips. I'm with United Water. I do business development for United Water. And with me tonight is Bill Ames. He's on our BD team as well. It's our pleasure to be here this evening. You know, we've been making our rounds through New York State, promoting or introducing our concept or solution model to various communities in the area. And we've been getting some very positive feedback. A lot of people are interested in learning more about this and sort of untapping the hidden value of their assets and what that can mean in terms of a structure for their infrastructure and how they can monetize the assets that they have. So, as I said, we've been getting some very good feedback, and we're developing models as we progress for people. You know, recently, the American Society of Civil Engineers did a survey of all the infrastructure assets in the United States for water and wastewater. And what they did is they basically gave the infrastructure a grade. And the grade that they gave all of our infrastructure was a D on a scale of A to F. And the reason why they gave it a grade of a D is because there's really been a history of deferred investment into our infrastructure assets. There's been sort of a mentality of, if you will, kicking the can down the road and deferring that investment in lieu of doing other things or for a lack of money. And what we've been seeing and hearing is that a lot of communities are leveraged beyond the value of their underlying assets. They have credit issues, they're borrowing more than they can afford to borrow, their credit ratings are going down. So it's really sort of a fiscal crisis, as I think we're all aware right now, where there's a lack of money and a need for more money. What we're seeing is that the federal funding for projects has really dried up. You know, there's a long line right now for state revolving funds and for EFC money, and there's a lot of people with their hands out in that line for the money, and there just isn't a lot of money available right now for those infrastructure needs. We're seeing communities that are overstretched with the demands on them fiscally for other infrastructure improvements, for schools, for unfunded pension obligations, for a variety of very serious needs. And what we've also seen is that since the passing of the Clean Water Act in 1972, you know, there was a long line then of young, talented people looking to make a career of water and wastewater operations. And those people, you know, 40 years later, they're now retiring, and there's really a lack of new blood and talent coming into it. That's something that, you know, a private company can bring into it. And then lastly, we're seeing and hearing that a lot of customers are facing rate shock right now. As we defer investments into our infrastructure and delay those improvements 5-7 years down the road, then we end up having to hit our consumers and clients with significant rate hikes of 20 to 25%, and that's always a very unpopular thing to try and advocate for as well. So, as I said, it's really almost a perfect storm in terms of all these things developing and placing additional stress on our infrastructure needs. So what we're here to talk about tonight is a concession model. And a concession model is a lease concession type deal. It's rather unique right now for water and wastewater infrastructure, although it's not really unique in terms of municipalities and communities. It is something that has been utilized in the past. And it's something now that we've partnered with private equity to form a lease concession deal where communities can untap the hidden value of their assets and monetize that into terms of an upfront payment or an annual fee or payment as well. So that they kind of get the best of both worlds, really. You know, I mentioned that we've been traveling around New York State, and a lot of what we've also been hearing is that a lot of communities are kind of fed up with the DEP and the EPA for hitting them with unfunded mandates for infrastructure needs, for enhanced nutrient removal, for stormwater separations, for long-term control plans, for disinfection byproduct regulations. So much to the point where a lot of them are saying, you know, this isn't the business we want to be in. We want to be out of the sewer business. And this model helps communities to achieve that. It provides operational efficiencies. It permits communities to really tap the assets and the knowledge that a private operator that's dedicated to this field can provide to communities. It can provide process knowledge, technical knowledge, IT knowledge. You can leverage purchasing as well. There's a lot of things that are brought to the table. It helps to ensure that the capital dollars are invested into the projects as well. It's actually contractually put upon the operator to ensure that a capital program is put in place where the capital dollars are annually invested. And what that helps to do is it helps create local jobs as well, because we prefer to work with local vendors, local contractors, local engineers to sub out that work to them as well, so we can help to sort of create an economic engine with the capital projects that would be incorporated into this. And lastly, the private equity helps to unlock the hidden value of the assets and provide a monetization for you where there can be a considerable lump sum payment, or as I said, or with the lease an annual fee, however the community would prefer to have it structured. So with the lease concession agreement, what would happen is all the existing debt that's on the water and wastewater systems would be paid off by the private equity partner. In addition, all the operating costs of the system would be included. All the capital needs of the system are funded into it. There's a rate stabilization fund, which is created as well to help sort of buffer, if you will, swings and demands on the money that's needed to operate the system, so that you don't have to go back to the city and the ratepayers asking for more money. So it helps take the politics out of that aspect of it as well. And lastly, it provides full management and innovation and operational best practices. I'll let Bill talk a little bit more about our successful model that we have.
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to talk about the more of the transactional part of a deal that we just did, and I'll talk about that specific project a little bit at the end. But the real questions are these that we've had with people that we've talked about. They want to know who maintains the ownership. Well, it stays with the city. It stays with the municipality. It's a lease. It's not a purchase. Operational and technical standards, we negotiate with you and your technical advisors on operations and technical standards to make sure that all of those things are taken care of. The rates are set for the life of the contract in a formula that's negotiated, and we'll show you how to get to that formula towards the end of the presentation. Impact on employees, we guarantee staffing and job opportunities for the employees. One of the questions as a concern is there a windfall to the concessionaire, and there isn't because of oversight and funding, and also in the excess revenue fund that's built in to roll over any excesses. And transition service, there's extensive transition and planning that goes into this so that it's a smooth move from the public to the private partner. The city that has recently done this is Bayonne, New Jersey. Bayonne will get $110 million of debt was funded, or $110 million of capital improvements over the 40-year project. We eliminated $125 million worth of debt that they had. That removal of debt got them an increase in their Moody's rating within 90 days of the start of the project, which helps them to be able to borrow for other things at a better rate. One of the other things that was very positive for Bayonne is we have systems in our network that are abutted to Bayonne. Bayonne has a purchase, put or take contract to buy their water, and we're going to be able to buy some excess water that they have, which helps the project out. We've also had, in the year or so that we've been doing this, we've been recognized by the Clinton Global Initiative to help meet the challenges of funding, and we've also were elected the most dramatic the partnership of the year at the America's Water Institute. So what do we do, and what do we get, and how do you move forward, and what do you want to see? What we do is we put a little handout together that's preliminary fundings for whatever city. And what we have on this is we give the outline of what the solution model does. Tells you that the concessionaire will be United Water, a private equity. The operator is United Water. The term in this case, and this happens to be a city to not be named, but it's the same sort of information that we'd be able to provide for Auburn. Upfront payment to the city in this instance would be $99 million. Of that, 46 would be to retire the debt off the balance sheet. Additional proceeds for upfront CapEx and for general purposes, and this keeps that upfront, those CapEx projects off your balance sheet. We'd also, because we're taking over the entire workings of the authority or the city's sewer water board, we'd give them $1 million a year to manage us, because you don't have any revenue. The revenue stream comes into the concessionaire. We'd also make annual payments, in this instance, of $1.5 million for capital improvements. And when we did this and we wrote the model, what the impact to consumers would be an annual increase of 2% plus the cost of the CPI of every year. The other things that could happen that would change this, might cause for additional revenue, would be changes in law. But if you've already got consent orders in place and they've been signed and gone into, that can be factored into the model. And any excess revenue that's collected, it's placed in a city-held fund, and that fund is able to be looked at every 5 years and to have the city decide what's the path for those funds. Do they stay in that fund, or do they sweep them out? And then that's the overall, and we usually run 3 different cases, and in this case, we talked about, the first one that I talked about was the $99 million, and that had an impact of 2%. Then we went into $121 million, which had additional proceeds to the city of $40 million. That went CPI plus 3%. And then we run a real low-case model that just defeases the debt, pays the capital improvement going forward, but doesn't provide any additional funds. And that would increase, in this case, the rate by CPI and 1.08%. So the next steps to get to this model, and this is the model that now we can start talking about, is we have a short list of information that we'd have to supply to the city if the city would like to look forward to this, or go forward looking more at this, and then we would prepare this model that we've just seen here on these last 2 slides to tell you what the impacts would be on rate increase, and to talk about what's the level of debt that you have that needs to be defeased, and what is the capital improvements that need to be done over the next 20 to 40 years. So that's what we had for tonight. We've got handouts for overview of the company, and also there's handouts in this. I have 6 packets, but I also have 8 presentations. So there's enough for everybody to get at least a presentation, and we have 6 packets with other information. So that's what we had. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Obviously one of the top concerns is the rate, okay, how that formula is going to shape out, and the staffing of our current employees.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's start with the staffing, the current employees. How would that work out if we were to take this?
Those employees will become our employees. We would do whatever it was that the council wanted to do in terms of retention of employees, length of time. In Bayonne, what the requirements were, they had 33 employees. They wanted us to offer them all jobs and keep them employed for at least 1 year. Our schedule for staffing is going down considerably. We're instrumenting the facilities heavily. They have no instrumentation now. Everything is manual. We're putting in an AMI system, an automated infrastructure management system. We're putting in SCADA throughout the system, and we're monitoring the remote pump stations that now have to be visited every day. So we're doing that. But the other thing is we've got other projects in the area, so we can bring those people to other places within Bergen and Hudson County where Bayonne is located.
No, if you could go over again the rates, how the rates are formulated.
How the rates are formulated, let me just get back to this one. How the rates are formulated is through the structure of what we have in terms of what the debt is to be retired, what the capital improvements are, what the operating costs are. And then what we do is we use a number, as in this case that's up here. We use a number, we use CPI as the base. Every year there's going to be a CPI, Consumer Price Index, increase. And then the other percent is whatever the percentage to make this project work to be able to pay those, defease those debts and pay those bills. So in this instance, the one that, the column C, it just defeases the debt in this city's instance for $46 million. And then we put in the capital improvements of $35 million. That's planned in their long-term control plan in this case. Put in the annual investments back to the city to pay for it, and then an annual payment to the city. And that one because of CPI plus 1.03. So for the entire term of the contract, you have the rates are going up every year based on the CPI plus whatever that percentage is.
Okay.
So you know, everybody knows what the rates are going to be from now until the end of the contract. They don't, you have to kind of guess on the CPI. You don't know that every year, but.
So this is a 50-year lease that you're talking about with
Yes.
the city?
Yes.
And I also have concerns, too, about how we protect our ratepayers out there with
Yep.
not absorbent increases over the years tied into some of your formulas that you have here, and that would be a huge concern that I would have in protecting our taxpayers out there with not having outrageous rate jumps in
Understand.
years that would be coming with some infrastructure improvements that we have to make in the city, so that would be...
Counselor, those are taken into consideration when we run these models, and this stays the same from the time we strike the deal to the end of the deal. It's CPI plus whatever that percentage is, unless there's some major change of law that forces you to build a new treatment plant. And we could fund that, but that would put a different change on this deal structure.
How would this affect our surrounding towns? We sell water and sewer to surrounding towns. Would they be at your mercy?
No.
We only have the deal?
No. We'd have to, that would have to be something we'd have to look at. That's a little bit of a twist from what the other places we've looked at. We understand that happens here, but there would be some mechanism in how that rate was structured. How do you sell to your surrounding communities? I don't have an answer. I don't mean to be dancing here, but that's a question that, we just have to work that out. And remember, what we're doing here is 35,000 foot level stuff. This is just trying to see if this has any momentum. And what can happen is we run this model and we look at it and we say to ourselves, this isn't going to fly. Nobody's going to like this. It's not, the numbers don't really work. In this instance, I think the numbers work very well, and this community is pretty excited about this. But, the numbers have to work. It's got to make sense for everybody.
So the rate then that you'd come up with would be all-inclusive, that would include our out-of-town contracts? You'd have to include that in as well?
What do you mean by out-of-town contract?
Well, the water that we sell to the towns and the villages.
Yes, that revenue would come to the concessionaire, yes.
Okay.
Let's look at a typical CPI. I don't recall what the CPI for this year is, but no, let's look at the column A where it's 2%. So that would be the CPI plus 2% times what water rate, base rate?
We base this on a revenue stream, and I can't answer that question right now. It would be, the base rate wouldn't be applicable any further.
Mm-hmm.
We take that into account when we did the revenue stream of all of the revenue. So the rate increase to the consumer would be the CPI plus whatever the percent.
So after the first year, the rate would be set, and then thereafter, the rate would be adjusted annually by this
Right.
number?
Yes.
By the combination of the CPI
Yes.
and the 2%.
Yes.
And that would be both for water and sewer, correct, or
Yes.
combined?
Yes.
So the answer right now, I mean, the way we have the contracts right now, that the rate is tied exactly to what the city residents pay. Whether that would carry through on this would have yet to be seen. Don't know how this would impact those contracts, or what we would have to do in response to this type of change. Another question I have is, again, regarding the initial capital investments. Obviously, we're in the process of doing a major capital project right now. You're saying that capital project would also fall under here?
Yes. If right now you have a law in place, like an an administrative consent order for a long-term control plan or those sorts of things, that would be part of it, because you're bound to do that. You have to do that, so we know that at this point.
So that first, all that debt and bonding would basically factor into the initial rate, would it not?
Yes.
The 50 years, is that the normal, or is that the optimum, or why 50 years?
The 50 years is something that the lenders like the most, and the lenders in this case, like in the Bayonne thing, it was a 65-35 debt to equity, 35 equity split between us and KKR, and then 65% of that total number, that 150 million or whatever it was, that went out to bidding, and 3 insurance companies bought that debt. And that's where this private equity comes from. These insurance companies are very interested in getting into the infrastructure industry because it's a steady, solid industry, and it has decent returns. So that's sort of the debt people want a term of that length. The longer term, the better it helps dampen things out. Bayonne was 40, okay. But the lenders have said we would really like it to be 50.
When you talked about the employees, 2 things in regards to that. Didn't like the idea that you guaranteed employment for a year. That makes me a little nervous. But secondly, if our employees down there decided that they wanted to transfer to another work area through their contractual agreement, you have the people on staff that you can bring in?
We'd get them. We'd get them.
You get them, okay.
Yeah, we would have to, Mayor, we'd have to be, this is a long process.
Right.
And we do this as a public-private partnership. So we're negotiating, over this period of time. And as we move down the negotiation chain, as we're finishing the contract, we're going to have meetings with those staff employees. We're going to understand, their needs and their wants. And there's going to be, they're going to be sort of bantering as to, are they going to bump back into the other areas of the city? And we'll know that long before the day that we start we have our first day in the job.
And
but that term, and that's up to you. Mm-hmm. The conditions of how we take over the employees is up to you. That's something you tell us.
If we were to give you the go-ahead tonight to move forward with this, what would be the implementation time? When will we turn it over?
Well,
approximately.
From the time that we were selected in Bayonne until the time we closed the deal was 18 months. However, we had 2 earthquakes, a couple major snowfalls, and 1 earthquake, 2 hurricanes, and a couple of major snowfalls, and there was talk of locust, but we got it closed.
Are there any cities or municipalities in New York State that you are in partnership with?
No. Well, for operational partners, we have, and we also own water utilities in the state of New York.
Is there some, I'm going to say, cases where you've done this in New York State that you can share with us what the rates were before, what they are after, and what rate increases typically were over the history of this, if you have any history of this?
I can't, not for New York. I can tell you that we did that very same thing in Bayonne, mm-hmm. and we looked at the normal rate increases, and they looked over the past 40 years, the average was about 4% a year, which fit into what the CPI and the rate increase that we had negotiated for Bayonne were. So we looked 40 years back, and that was the average annual rate increase.
So what was the initial rate after the agreement was signed? What is a percentage over what was as a percentage either under or over what was in place?
The city was poised to do a 26% rate increase if they didn't go forward with this. Their first year's rate increase was about 8%. The second year is 0, the third year is 0, and then it goes up by the CPI and the percentage. So they bypassed what would have been a 25% rate increase to an 8.5%, and then had 2 years with no rate increases at all, and then started up with the percentage and the CPI.
I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but I think this question was brought up before, and I think it probably would happen again, is this probably would require a public referendum for a change in our charter, because the language in our charter, so that would have to be talked about or discussed, because it maintains in our charter that we operate and maintain the water and sewer systems in the city, so.
We've seen those comments that have been before the council on some of the other council meetings and minutes of the discussion of the authority and things, so we understand that. Fortunately, in New Jersey, they have 2 state statutes, one for water operations and maintenance and one for wastewater operations and maintenance. So it made, from the state level, it made it a little easier.
I'd like to go back to the employees again. So they would be essentially moved from a public employee to a private employee sector. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
This is just the presentation.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
This one is just, these 2 are just the presentations, information about us.
Thank you. I think I'm handling it. Here. All these things?
Here's another one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us this evening. So,
Thanks a lot. Have a good evening.
yeah. We'll move along, public announcements.
I have a few. I have meeting announcements. Monday, October 28th, the zoning board will meet at 7 p.m. here at City Hall. Next week's city council meeting is being moved to Wednesday, October 30th at 6 p.m. here in City Hall, so that this Wednesday's meeting replaces Thursday's meeting, and we will vote on a resolution for that later in the meeting. And also, there's an announcement that the second Franklin Street Water Main Replacement Project public meeting will be held on Monday, October 28th at 7 p.m. at Cayuga Community College's Business and Industry Center, and that, I think it's at 7 o'clock on Monday. That's it.
Thank you. 3 to 7.
Starts at 3.
Oh, so sorry. It's at 3 to 7.
City managers report.
Debbie covered the one item I was going to address about Franklin Street. We have a letter here that is very nice and complimentary to one of our employees that I'd like to read for the council. It's to Mike Talbot, our Superintendent of Public Works. It says, "Dear Mike, the past 18 months I've been involved in many projects. I've been asked by District 14 residents to intervene on no less than 100 problems or concerns that irritate them as taxpayers. The work completed consisted of tree cutting, trash problems, and other related complaints. No matter how small or large the issue, you have taken care of the issue in a swift and professional manner. Your consistent leadership in these areas overflows into the rest of your responsibilities. Much more can be said and or written on your timely response, but thank you for your attention to these matters. Regards, Michael Didio, Majority Leader, Legislator, District 14." So, thank you, Mike. And I know your crews helped out to solve a lot of those problems as well. Also, just want to acknowledge DPW 2 in their work on fixing the Herman Avenue main break. That was one of those Sunday night, early Monday morning issues that required the crews to mobilize. I know Councilor Smith was engaged in that, and it involved not just our crews, but utility companies, outside contractors, the school district, and suppliers.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, Doug, Tommy and his crew got right up there. I made a phone call to Tom at, I don't know, was it 8:30, 9 o'clock? And him and his crew were up there in 20 minutes, checking out individual homes who lost some water and water pressure. So kudos to the water department for your promptness, and I know the residents deeply appreciated it.
And the last thing I have, Mayor, is just a heads up for anybody who has unpaid parking tickets. We are going to start using the booths again to try to enhance our revenue collection. So beginning in November, the police department will be renewing that program in an effort to increase some of our revenues from people that owe parking fines.
What's the threshold on that? Do you know? Is it the number, or do you?
I think there has to be 3, and I don't know if I want to put the chief on the spot. He may not have the answer, but yeah, you have to have pretty much ignored your tickets and done it more than once. So
If you're 2.5, you better watch out.
But we just want to give people a heads up, because once the boot's applied, there's an extra charge to get it taken off. So
It's a $50 charge, is it not?
yeah, so you know, we're just trying to get the word out to pay up now and avoid the boot.
Doug, what is owed on that?
Pardon?
What is owed?
You know, we have a printout of all of the parking fees that are owed, and we haven't sorted it out for those that we think are collectible, but frankly, it goes back to the 1980s. So we need to look at that. We were looking at it just today, in fact, to purge some of those older ones, and then just add up what we believe is collectible in the last 8 years, maybe, 8 or 10 years.
Well, let me ask you a question. How come we've been so lax in the recovery of our accounts receivable, I should say?
I can't speak to earlier, but we're, you know, I've been here a couple years. We've recognized this is something where there is some uncollected debt, and we're going to go after it.
I know the city spent quite a bit of money in obtaining this boot system and trying to move forward, and then nothing happened with it.
We're moving forward. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Presentation, petitions, and communication?
I have none.
Seeker?
Well, no.
Ordinances?
None.
Resolution?
Yes.
Council Resolution Number 123 of 2013, reaffirming the conditional negative declaration for the Center of Performing Arts and Education project. Do we have a sponsor? Councilor Graney, second. Councilor Smith?
Council Resolution Number 123 of 2013 by Councilor Graney, seconded by Councilor Smith. Whereas on September 12, 2013, the City Council approved Seeker Resolution Number 104 of 2013, issuing a condition negative declaration pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act relative to the Center for Performing Arts and Education project located at 1-7 State Street in the City of Auburn, County of Cayuga, New York. And whereas pursuant to Seeker, the conditioned negative declaration was subject to a 30-day public comment period, which ended on October 18, 2013. And whereas the following comments were received during the 30-day public comment period. 9 packages from the Camardo Law Firm, with 1 dated August 22, 2013, package to Andrew Fusco from Justin Huffman that contains 11 exhibits. 2 dated September 10, 2013, to Andrew Fusco from Justin Huffman regarding the Seeker review. 3 dated September 18, 2013, to Deborah A. McCormick from Justin Huffman regarding FOIL. 4 dated September 26, 2013, to Andrew S. Fusco from Kevin Mandillo regarding planning board schedule. 5 dated October 10, 2013, to Doug Selby with the following attachments. October 9, 2013, letter from Jim Napoleon. Another copy of August 31st, 2012 CES letter, another copy of the September 5th, 2013 CES letter, Allen Creek versus Town of Penfield case, letter from the Camardo Law Firm to the Planning Board dated October 1st, 2013, with the following attachments. One, a copy of the July 26, 2013 Napoleon letter, another copy of the August 16, 2013 letter from Brian Hicks, Jeff Dygert, and Howard Tanner to Karen Green, copy of the March 15, 2013 Vivone affidavit, a copy of the April 16, 2009 Phase 1 ESA, a copy of the AECC report dated February 17, 2011, a copy of the May 2, 2011 AECC report, copy of the August 31, 2012 CES report, copy of the September 5, 2013 CES report, a copy of the oral argument transcript, a copy of the Camardo 4th Department decision dated June 28, 2012.
It is June 8th, I believe.
Oh, June 8th. Where did I get to? I'm so sorry. Another copy of Judge Polito's decision dated May 9th, 2013. 6, dated October 14th, 2013, to Andrew Fusco, dated October 15th, 2013, to the City Council with the following attachment. October 12th, 2013, letter from Jim Napoleon to Joe Camardo. 8, dated October 16th, 2013, to City Council with the following attachment. Updated October 12th, 2013, letter from Jim Napoleon to Joe Camardo. 9, dated October 17th, 2013, to Doug Selby with the following exhibits. A copy of the Camardo Law Firm letter to Andrew Fusco dated August 22nd, 2013. Copy of the Camardo 4th Department decision dated June 8th, 2013. A copy of the February 17th, 2011 AECC report. Copy of the May 2nd, 2011 AECC report. A copy of the August 31st, 2013 CES report. A copy of the oral argument transcript, a copy of Judge Polito's decision dated May 9th, 2013, copy of the oral argument transcript, a copy of the September 5th, 2013 CES letter, a section of a book entitled Environmental Impact Review in New York, another copy of the Allens Creek versus Town of Penfield case, a copy of the August 16th, 2013 letter from Karen Green, a portion of drawing L-101, a copy of the March 15th, 2013 Vivone affidavit, a copy of the July 26, 2013 Napoleon letter, a copy of the October 9th, 2013 Napoleon letter, a copy of the October 12th, 2013 Napoleon letter, 14 copies of an undated form letter signed by the following individuals regarding the cost of the project: Natasha King, Ronald Grube, Ph.D., E. Wagner, Dia Carbajal, Patricia Gridley, Anthony Hitch, Kathy Brill, J. Mazias, unreadable signature, Richard Brower, Sarah Davenport, Margaret Devereaux, Jane Kiernan, Meg Osborne. 4 emails in support of the project dated October 11th, 2013 from Bonnie Richards to Doug Selby. One dated October 9th, 2013 from Jay and Kim Pearson to Doug Selby. An email dated October 8th, 2013 from Lisa Myers to Doug Selby. An email dated October 8th, 2013 from Hetty Easter to Doug Selby. Correspondence from Peter Rizika dated September 13th, 2013, transmitting the PowerPoint presentation given at the City Council meeting on September 12th, 2013. Now therefore be it resolved that based upon a review of the above referenced comments, the Auburn City Council hereby makes no change to the condition negative declaration issued on September 12, 2013 for the Center for Performing Arts and Education project.
Council?
Yes. First off, the correspondence that I gave dated September 13th does not belong in this portion of the file. It belongs in the portion of the file that was done for the SECRA. And speaking on that now, I would ask that the clerk get a copy of the SECRA Resolution 104 of 2013 and all the attachments, please.
Right now?
Yes. It better match this mess I got in my hands.
Andy?
This is what was voted on. It's missing, the EAF is missing every other page. How could we possibly have looked at this if we have an EAF missing every other page that we voted on? In addition, this was supposed to be on file. I've got a letter here that says, I stopped by City Hall on Friday, October 11, 2013, to review the secret documentation, particularly the EAF, since the earlier copy you provided me skipped each consecutive page, i.e. 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. As you are all aware, secret documentation must be kept on file and be readily accessible to public and made available on request. See 6 NYCRR 617.12B3. This is particularly important in this case since the secret documentation was part of the conditional negative declaration, along with a 30-day public comment period. However, I was shocked to find out the EAF was not on file whatsoever and was told that you have not yet fixed the EAF. So, given the fact that this was not available for public comment, in addition to the, as outlined by the law, it was missing pages here. This is what we approved. This is what we voted on. An incomplete EAF. How can we possibly justify that we did a hard look if we voted on something missing every other page? Not only that, we have a record here that is in such disarray, unlabeled, missing documentation, and that's even listed on this resolution. This, I even asked that we delay it a 1 week to get this in shape. So here we have this. We're going to be getting sued here, and we're going to be sued, and we're putting it on a T. This is a big mess. I told it was a big mess. That is unacceptable. What are we going to do about this? We violated the law. We did not fulfill the law. I took an oath, when I took this office, that we would obey the law.
Mr. Fusco or Mr. Rossi, anything to add?
I'll defer to Mr. Fusco.
I disagree with Mr. Rozika's comments.
Thank you.
Well, Andy, just so we have some clarity here, just for the people to understand, what's the EAF?
The EAF is the Environmental Assessment Form. In this case, it was 3 parts. There was a Part 1, which you received back in the summer. There was a Part 2, which you received on September 5th, and you went over line by line with Mr. Lynch on September 5th and September 12th. There is a Part 3, which you reviewed on September 12th with Mr. Lynch's assistance. Separate copies of that were all provided to you.
So that's why the pages were not in numerical order?
As I indicated when we discussed this back in September, I'll readily admit that the secretary who was asked to provide photocopies for the members of council apparently did get things out of order. Fortunately, there was a copy that was maintained in order. Mr. Selby had a copy of that after September 12th, in fact on September 13th, and has maintained it since. As far as whether the matter is in order or not, it sits in the city clerk's, right in front of the city clerk right there. I've had an opportunity to go over it today. Mr. Lynch, who's here, had an opportunity to go over it today. It is in order. It has been in order since September 13th. The documents that have been asked to be reviewed have been in their proper place. Again, I apologize that the copy that was given to you fellows on September 12th, due to a secretarial, the difficulty of a secretary making copies of documents that, as you can see, are thousands of pages in length, I think is understandable. And that's part of the problem here. Look how many times the word "another" is used in the resolution that the clerk just read to us. The opponent in this case provides copies of things over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, so that the end result is a document that is a set of documents in front of the city clerk's desk there, which I think is probably about 7 inches thick.
Andy?
These things can happen when we're being papered to death.
So Andy, this is my concern. What will affect us in the court? I want to avoid at all possibility us getting sued, which will prolong what everyone's trying to do here.
I am satisfied that a proper copy of all of the documentation in order has been maintained throughout this process.
But we didn't.
And let me further say, when Mr. Huffman showed up unannounced on September, or excuse me, I think it was September 11th, excuse me, I'd strike that, whenever it was, October 11th, a week ago Friday, he shows up totally unannounced, no appointment, doesn't call to see if I'm even going to be in. I happened to be in Rochester that day in trial in another matter for the city of Auburn. Had Mr. Huffman asked for the opportunity to review all the materials in my file, I would have come in on Saturday to meet with him and do so. So thankfully, my secretary didn't allow him to just ransack my office and go through everything without me being present.
But no, Andy, will the judge hold anything against us because what we passed was not in order? Will that come back and bite us in the rear end?
Again, I don't think so. I don't believe so. Everything that has been referenced in the resolution that you passed on September 12th, and that the resolution, which I hope will be passed tonight, have been provided to you during the course of the last 35 or so days. Again, I sympathize with Pete's observation that the set of papers that he has is out of order. I recognize that. For a time, the set I had was out of order as well. And it was that I had to just get in the third floor meeting room and just spread it out and get it back in order, which I in fact did. And I'll accept responsibility for that. I'm not going to blame some secretary because that happened. But that's life. What you have, what you voted on, you've had copies of. And the fact that Mr. Huffman came to my office totally unannounced, with no appointment whatsoever, would I happen to be in another city trying a matter for the city of Auburn, which then resulted in the letter that Mr. Ruzicka just read to us, I think should not be something that you should be afraid of down the road. The issues in this case have been, I think, well set out. We've got the question of the vapors, and you addressed that in your part 3. We took a very, very hard look at the at the situation involving both the street and the soils, whether they're contaminated, whether remediation is needed there. Mr. Ricazika did an excellent job with the PowerPoint, which the only reason it's included in this document tonight, Pete, is because I got it 3 days after the September 12th meeting. But you said include it in the record. I've included it in the record. I'll include it in both places if that's what you wish. I have no problem with doing that. But the fact that Pete did such an excellent job on the PowerPoint that he showed us, and which is now part of the record, I think demonstrates that we did take a hard look on September 12th. And so what we're here tonight to do is to review what we have received between September 12th and tonight and see whether that changes your mind. The test is whether the documents and the opposition that the items that the clerk just read to us would be enough to change a reasonable person's mind to think that what we've received in the 30 days changes what we did on September 12th. That's the test of law, and I'm satisfied that if you reaffirm your September 12th decision tonight, it is defendable.
So now you know Judge Alito, you've dealt with him, I don't know how many times.
Judge Leone or Judge Polito?
I said Alito. Wasn't Alito the OJ case? Okay.
I've dealt with Judge Polito a few times too.
Don't bring the glove, but Polito. You've dealt with him a number of times, so you know him better than I do. So again, we're looking to keep this out of court, keep this out of litigation so we can move forward.
Well, I think what we're looking to do is win the litigation. I don't think we can help the fact that there will be litigation. That is something that's beyond our control. What is perhaps within our control is being successful in that litigation.
Right, exactly. So you're comfortable with what we passed before, even though it wasn't an order, that shouldn't be a problem?
Yes.
Okay. Now, going to the fire issue. The one document that we have and the photograph that was taken on State Street with truck number 2, and there's 2 cars parked on the left and the right side. Okay, so again, I'm just bringing these up to make sure that we're comfortable enough to go to court with this. Now, it's mentioned here in the report, this was, I believe, from Mr. Napoleon. There was no mention in any of the documents received of an emergency evacuation plan, or excuse me, that's something else. The portion of State Street adjacent to the theater is only 1 lane wide and not capable of allowing vehicles to pass one another. Therefore, in the event of any emergency situation at or near the theater, only 1 vehicle at a time might be able to service the emergency. Now, I know this may be inconvenient for several of the people who work on the street, but would we just be better off so the project could continue if we just did something with the parking, as far as making it one side, or maybe eliminate it on that street? I know that would cause inconvenience for several of the properties, but again, we're looking to win in litigation.
And and there may well come a day which, in your legislative discretion, you will wish to address the parking on either side of the street directly in front of the theater. I would caution against that now, however, because in effect what you're doing is setting a condition.
So you're not eliminating instead of...
Right, I don't want you to paint yourself into a corner tonight to suggest that you are or sometime will address the parking situation.
So then,
because that Matt, is exactly what happened back on February 17th and 24th, 2011. In an attempt to appease the opposition, this council, where there was no evidence of the vapors being so toxic as to exceed state standards,
did something which a court later construed as a condition. And that's why we're back here again. I would, as much as I hear you, for you to now talk about, gee, I want to fix the parking situation sometime in the future, sounds to me like you're about to set another condition that's not in Part 3 of the EAF. Let us cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now, the issue is whether an alternative to the 26-foot rule and the 30-foot rule that Mr. Cox stood here and told us about earlier is available to us under the law. And as you'll recall from September 12th, that question, I think, was addressed rather convincingly by Mr. Tanner, Chief Dygart, and Mr. Hicks. So I'm comfortable in defending that the theory that the alternative to the 26-foot rule and the 30-foot rule that Mr. Cox spoke about earlier tonight is in fact defendable, and that in the proper exercise of their discretion, Mr. Hicks, Mr. Tanner, and Chief Dygart have the ability under New York State law to accept the alternative that was proffered to them by the architect for the building.
So you're not, and again, I'm looking at the angle of just diffusing a potential act of litigation. It's not going to do that. So if they say, hey, there's no vehicles can get around here, we can say, well, yeah, you can, because we don't allow parking here. So they can get around there. That doesn't.
I gotta interject here. I gotta disagree with you, Andy. Secret Law 617.7E provides that a lead agency may amend its negative declaration at any time prior to the undertaking, funding, or approving an action. So we can do that.
I'm sorry, do what?
Amend the negative deck.
I didn't say you can't. I didn't say you can't. I did, and if I inferred that, I'm glad you corrected me.
Well, that's
clearly you can amend.
But you're saying it's not necessary because
the issue presently before us is whether the alternatives provided by the architect to the various rules in the state building code are or are not acceptable by the code officers. Can they do this thing, which Mr. Vavone in his affidavit and Mr. Cox tonight in his presentation said that cannot be done, that the law doesn't exist. Mr. Tanner very demonstratively held the law up for us all on September 12th. The law does in fact exist, so I disagree with Mr. Vavone on that, and I'm prepared to defend the opinion of Mr. Tanner, the opinions of Mr. Tanner, Chief Dygart, and Mr. Hicks on that very matter, since I expect it to be litigated.
But Andy, the threshold for the building height sets it up so that it's no longer a fire apparatus road, but an aerial apparatus road. There is no exception in Part D. It is not, because of the building height, and it doesn't even talk about any conditions, any construction, anything. It talks solely to building height. You exceeded the threshold for building height. It now becomes an aerial apparatus road needing 26 feet within of an unobstructed approach on either side.
I understand that is the argument of Mr. Camardo, that is the argument of Mr. Huffman, that is the argument of Mr. Cox. That is also the argument of Mr. Vavone. Mr. Tanner explained to you on September 12th why he thinks that that argument's incorrect. You have correctly stated exactly what Mr. Camardo's argument is. I understand that. And Mr. Tanner was asked that question on September 12th, that wait a minute, these other very learned fellows say that the alternative that you're relying on doesn't exist in the law. And Mr. Tanner explained that to all of us. I understood his explanation, and I'm ready to go forward in defense of that. I do understand, however, that Mr. Camardo, Mr. Cox, and Mr. Huffman do not accept that.
The exception they're taking is that due to an impossible condition, which is topography, water, grades, none of this exists on State Street. We're giving them full control of State Street during the construction phase. They're cutting the street up, putting a pad out there. They're fencing it off. They're cutting the street, removing some, not only sidewalks, but also underlying utilities. They have full control of that street. They can easily, or they absolutely should, widen that street out to avoid and comply with Appendix D. The building threshold is such, the height is such that it falls under Appendix D. The law is very clear. There is no exception because of the topography isn't there, there's no waterway, there's no the location on property, there's a fire access road that exists, and it's called State Street. All it is now, because this new construction, the two ends and the parking issues have to be taken away and made the entire road made to comply. That's cut and dry. It's Appendix D.
Mr. Fusco, we were mandated by Judge Polito.
Show me where that says it in this decision right here. I want to see it. Where you're going to say that.
I haven't heard the question yet.
At the moment.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I didn't hear the question.
We're basically mandated by Judge Polito to move forward with our actions as a council to accomplish certain things. And I don't have the right terminology, trust me.
I think that's an accurate paraphrase.
What I believe by what you are telling us by this, we have accomplished what our job is, if we vote for a resolution in regards to that this evening. Am I correct? Or I know there was some things that were out of order, clerical errors, for lack of better words, but this is the updated, this is the correct version, and this is what we were charged to do.
Yes, if you reaffirm tonight your September 12th decision, I believe you will be acting tonight in conformity with Judge Polito's order of May 9th.
So what will Judge Polito look at once this goes back to him?
Well, he's going to have to look at the various arguments that Mr. Camardo and Mr. Ruzicka have articulated. I mean, we kind of know what the arguments of the opponent will be. I mean, we've taken, quite frankly, the hardest look at this I've ever had a municipal client in my life take a hard look at. And so Judge Polito will be asked to review the soil issue. Mr. Camardo will ask him to do that, I assume. Mr. Camardo will ask Judge Polito to look at the State Street situation. I imagine Mr. Camardo is going to ask him to consider the finances of the college, whether that is or is not an environmental question remains to be seen. But I think the issues are well framed. Again, I've never seen, in 35 years of doing this, I've never seen a municipal body take such a hard look at environmental concerns. You know, Pete's done a great job. There's no question about it. The PowerPoint articulated exactly what Mr. Camardo's likely causes of action will be. And so, you know, we know what the issues are going to be. We've heard what Mr. Huffman and Mr. Cox talk about when they come here at every meeting and speak for 3 minutes. So I don't think there's going to be any surprises here. We know what the issues are going to be, and I'm prepared to defend the city on those issues if, in fact, you reaffirm the decision tonight.
So going back to the September 5th meeting.
Actually, September 12th.
I'm sorry.
We started it on the 5th and finished it on the 12th.
Oh, yeah, I had to leave the 5th. the contaminants on the property that Mr. Camardo has brought up. So, and I know the one discussion that that we had during that evening was that we were trying to get the term, the vapor barriers. All right. So is the vapor barriers are sufficient in dealing with the potential contaminants?
Well, I'm not an engineer, but what you accepted on September 12th was the Plumlee engineering system, which said that it was sufficient, and that's why you included it in Part 3 of your EAF. Ironically, that's what the 30-day period was for comment about, and we didn't get any comments on that one.
On the vapor barriers.
Right.
Okay.
We got a lot of comments about the street, we got a lot of comments about fire departments, and we got a lot of comments about teachers being laid off, but the thing that the law asks us to receive comments during the 30-day period, mainly the remediation of the vapors, we didn't get any comments on.
Okay. Now, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Peter.
All right. Now, we still have the issue of the dirt that's coming out of there. How do you know if that's contaminated or not now? What are you going to do? Do a soil test after it comes out of the ground? How are we going to know what's in that dirt? If it's bad, you're going to move a problem and give it to somebody else.
I can only tell you what the engineers said on whom you relied on September 12th. The Plumlee engineers said that the amount of vapors that were detected do not exceed any thresholds which would allow a reasonable engineer to suspect that the soil beneath what had been the cellar before is in fact contaminated to an extent that requires remediation. Now, very importantly, CES, Mr. Camardo's engineer, didn't disagree with that. CES, if I can paraphrase what that engineering firm said, is that, well, hey, as long as the cement's been removed, why don't we just check the soil and see? And while that may make sense to a layman, that's not the test of an engineer. What engineers are asked to do are test the vapors above the soil and then come to a conclusion whether the source of the vapors, namely the soil, is so contaminated as to warrant mitigation. And I understand you feel that way. You voted as you voted on September 12th. But the majority of this board who voted on September 12th said we, in effect, accept the Plumlee report.
Andy, an engineer, even in their study, they said that the test was skewed low. We had holes punched in the concrete, open windows. I mean, the conditions were far from perfect from having a very reliable test. They even said in their report that to err on the side of conservative caution. In other words, move it up the matrix.
Who said that?
The CES report, the first one. They even talked about the test, saying that it was likely to be biased low. That was right in their text. So we're hanging our hat, and everybody's making a decision saying that, oh, that soil's great, on a test that's meaningless almost because it was fouled.
I understand that you accept the CES engineering study and you don't accept the Plumlee engineering study. I understand that. Understand in my line of work, Pete, every single case that I try has two experts on either side of the case saying the opposite things. It happens 100% of the time. And what the job of the judge or the jury is to decide which of those two engineering experts they're going to believe, they're going to accept. It's 100% of the time that's what happens. This is no different. We've got CES essentially saying one thing, and we've got Plumlee essentially saying the exact opposite.
The report from the city received from their engineer, said the test was biased low by the perforations in the concrete and water ingress. Because of it, they said to move the matrix up. In other words, be more conservative. That was from the report that the city got. CES just confirmed it. Said, yeah, they're right. The test is biased. So, like I said, you don't know what's in the ground. You're pulling up soil that's likely to be contaminated. And where are you going to put it? You put it somewhere, and if it turns out that it's a problem, guess what? You just pass the problem down to somebody else.
Again, I understand that that is what you believe. But the majority who voted on September 12th say otherwise. Again, we have these, I can't make this any clearer.
We can amend it right now. We could fix it.
I understand that, but I don't have a vote. I understand what you're saying. I understand you want your colleagues to change their mind. You've made that very clear.
Andy, I want to be clear on this. I think they engineer that for the building to be safe.
I'm sorry, Bill?
I believe they engineered that so the building is safe. I believe that. And in your defense, I came up to you unannounced and asked for the documentation. And you showed me the documentation 3 weeks ago.
And to tell you the truth, Bill, had I been there last Friday when Mr. Huffman showed up unannounced, I would have showed him too. You know, it's not that I would have said something like, gee, Justin, hit the road and give me a call next time. You know me well enough that I don't do that. All of you know me well enough. When you come, I accommodate you. And I would have accommodated him as well. I don't think it's a coincidence that he showed up the day that I'm in Rochester on a drugstore trial for the city of Auburn. That's a public record. I don't think he just showed up thinking I was there that day. Everybody knew where I was that day.
Now, Andy, I don't know if you might want to have the codes answer this question on the fire issue. Why don't we need a variance from the state? It's been argued that we need a variance from the state.
Right. My reading of the code gives effectively two choices. You can get a variance from the state, or you can accept an alternative promulgated or proffered to you by the architect. I think the reason that the former was not chosen, because I asked Chief Dygart that myself when we were going through all this. He said, Andy, they only meet once a year in Syracuse, and you know, it's going to take a long time for us to be able to do that. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's essentially, yeah, come on up. So, and let me just say this before Jeff speaks. Do understand that for the purposes of enforcing the state building and fire code, he is the state. You passed a law on that very point 4 years ago. Brian Hicks is the state. Howard Tanner is the state. The state allows our code officers to be their adjuncts, if you will. So while I'm certain there'd be a lot of security, because even Pete mentioned at one time, having someone say in Albany or Syracuse, yeah, this is okay by me, Chief Dygart, Mr. Tanner, and Mr. Hicks have the authority to do what they did.
So you're saying the state gives that authority, delegates that authority to the fire chief and the codes department?
It allows the local municipality to nominate their code officer, in this case Brian Hicks, to be the state representative for the purposes of enforcing and interpreting the state building code and fire code. You did that very thing about 4 years ago. I drafted that resolution.
And on the dimensions of the street, jeepers, I don't know which packet's in these. How do we get around that issue because it's not in compliance with the code.
Again, there's two ways to deal with an issue. There can be an exception made based on enhancements to the building, physical enhancements to the building, mechanical enhancements, things like that. That's one way to deal with a problem. The other way to deal with a problem is to go through a variance. And the way I see a variance is if we had come out as the fire department or code enforcement and said, your building does not comply, we're going to say absolutely not to this. And whoever the developer is, whoever owns the building is going to build it, whatever it happens to be, if they disagree with us, then they could apply for a variance. So they've got two options. They can say, well, we're not going to modify the building. We're not going to make any accommodations. We think that the local officials are wrong. We're going to go get a variance from the state on this. But rather than do that, they made accommodations, they made changes to the building that were acceptable to both code enforcement and the fire department, that we said, yes, these enhancements, these changes have made it so that in this environment that we're working in, that we can provide appropriate fire protection.
Now, Chief, that includes the stairwell?
That includes the stairwell.
Incorporated into a 10-story building?
Sure. We've had 2 years to toss around all sorts of ideas between the three of us, between code enforcement and myself and my staff, to toss around, geez, what about this, what about that? We don't offer solutions necessarily to the engineers and architects. That's not our job. We let them come to us with things and we determine whether or not it's feasible. But I think it's important that you look at things in a little bit different way also. That's an existing piece of property. There's not a whole heck of a lot. If we could build a shorter building there, I guess, would be an option, but that's not what currently is being looked at. But if that building, say, was a 4 or 5 story building, it was already beyond that. It was an older building, and then maybe it suffered a fire loss or something like that, but the shell was still good. If the building was going to be rebuilt, if it was more than 50% of a rebuild, technically it has to meet the code. And at some point, there's going to have to be, because of the situation, there would have to be some exceptions made, some enhancements made to accommodate that and rehabilitate it, whether you're rehabilitating the building or you're rehabilitating that portion of property. We've done our due diligence. I'm confident in it. The photos that you have in front of you were not staged.
I didn't say they were staged.
I know, but I've been accused of staging those photos. They were not staged. Those were, the truck went down the street, stopped, and set up. I'm not going to do that to you. I'm not going to jeopardize my credibility to do something like that. I can tell you the other day, I'm walking downtown. The same ladder truck that's posted in those photos was on its way to a call, got canceled on the way to the call, and turned down State Street. It didn't encroach in the oncoming traffic on Genesee before it did it. It made the swing without a problem.
I don't believe it.
We're confident in our ability to protect that.
Further discussion, council?
Yeah, so now I've heard the word obstruction used here. The only obstruction here that's been used so far I see is been the law. The problem is it went through 2 courts, overturned for 2 courts. This could have been fixed and done, and if it had been done right out of the box, we wouldn't be here today. So the term obstruction or being obstructed has only one blame, and it's the law. The law was not complied with, hence the delay. Again, like I say, I really, truly feel that we're heading down that path again.
I'm sorry, Chief. The building is going to be 36 feet?
I don't recall off the top of my head. Do you guys?
36 feet?
36 feet.
Okay. Now, if the, that exception that we keep hearing, does that apply to buildings? Does that only apply to buildings of a certain height?
No, that would apply to any building that had a problem with, whether it be an access road. There could be other exceptions for other reasons as well.
Okay.
Where's the exception in Appendix D?
I'm sorry?
Where does the exception exist in Appendix D?
It's in the first part with access roads.
No, it's no longer an access road, it's an aerial apparatus road, after a building gets over a certain height threshold. That's what the code says.
Well, the same concept, many of the same concepts would apply with a multi-story building beyond the reach of an aerial device. So the code is designed to be somewhat flexible. I think everybody needs to realize that. The code is designed to have some flexibility in it. If it did not, we'd still be building buildings out of wood and dowels and things like that. There's flexibility in the code to account for changes in engineering systems, materials, techniques, things like that. So those things are always able to be considered in the construction of a building. Building materials, building design, all that stuff changes on a daily basis.
Brian, you want to chime in?
Counselor, your question was about the exception in Appendix D. There is no exception in Appendix D, but we don't even get to Appendix D. So Appendix D isn't even addressed at this point because we use the exception prior to that, and that's where you don't go to Appendix D. It doesn't even send us towards Appendix D. That's where we stop, we move on to another matter.
Okay. Brian, what's the impossible condition? Tell me, where is it impossible to fix that road?
That I can't answer.
Because there is no impossible condition.
So, Pete, I don't think the code uses the word impossible condition.
It talks about grades, waters, topography. These are physical features that you can't adjust. What we have here, at each end of it is a piece of curb and sidewalk.
But I don't believe that anybody has addressed that portion of it as saying it was impossible to do any of it.
What's preventing the road from being fixed?
That I cannot answer.
So therefore, if the road can be fixed, fix it, and it goes away.
Brian, can you just explain for me? I'm sorry, dumb it down a little bit for me. We don't have to get to Appendix D. What do you mean by that?
We use the exception so it doesn't send us to Appendix D. We stop way before that.
Okay. And we're eligible for that exception.
That's why it's there.
I guess we'll let the courts decide that.
Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Counselor Grady?
Yes.
Counselor Camardo?
Because of my position at the college, I'll abstain.
Counselor Smith?
Aye.
Counselor Rozika?
No.
Mayor Quill?
Aye.
Carried.
Thank you, members of council. And just for the benefit of the record, I'd like to have a pat on the back for not only Steve Lynch, who helped us get through this, but also Jenny Haynes. Due to my absence for the reasons I discussed earlier, she was a real ace in coming through and helping out my office to be able to get us to the point that we were at tonight. And I think she deserves my thanks and everyone's praise.
Thank you.
We delay.
Getting weary.
Council, let's take a, if we could, let's take a 5-minute break, recess, if we could. Belong to Council Resolution number 124, authorizing council meeting date change. Do we have a sponsor? Councilor Camardo, seconded by Councilor Graney.
Council Resolution Number 124 of 2013 by Councilor Camardo, seconded by Councilor Graney. Whereas the rules of the Auburn City Council and the city charter require the Auburn City Council meet on Thursday of each week to conduct business, and whereas a meeting scheduled for the last Thursday in October, namely October 31st, is Halloween, and whereas in the interest of the citizens of the city of Auburn and convenience of all parties, the Auburn City Council desires to reschedule the meeting for the last week of October 2013 from Thursday, October 31st to Wednesday, October 30th, said meeting to be held at the usual time of 6 p.m. And whereas the subsequent meetings of the City Council shall return to the Thursday of each week thereafter at the usual time. Now therefore be it resolved that the Auburn City Council does hereby move the Auburn City Council meeting scheduled for Thursday, October 31st at 6 p.m. to Wednesday, October 30th at 6 p.m., and all subsequent meetings thereafter shall be on Thursday of each week unless modified by subsequent council resolutions, and the clerk is hereby requested to notify the public of the change in the meeting date as set forth herein.
Thank you. Discussion. Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Councilor Graney? Yes. Councilor Camardo?
Yes.
Councilor Smith?
Aye.
Councilor Rozika?
Yes.
Mayor Quill?
Aye.
Carried.
Mr. Selby, we're approaching Thanksgiving in another month, so we should be looking resolutions for that. And other than falling on December 25th, Christmas, I don't know what day of the week that is, so we should be looking ahead if we could.
Right, the clerk has reminded me of that, and we've got it on our future agenda.
Very good, thank you. Local laws,
None.
table legislation.
None.
Mr. Selby, other business, department head?
Yes, Mayor and Council, the council has asked for monthly updates on department budgets. We, at the beginning of October, our treasurer handed out the first quarter's results in terms of revenues and expenditures in tabular form. Tonight, what I'd like to do is invite a couple departments to give maybe a summary presentation, if you will, with some graphs and charts. And if there are other questions, the rest of the departments are here, and we can get into those issues. But I'd like to kind of show you what we think might be useful for the public to understand how our costs are trending and how our revenues are coming in. So with the council's permission, I'd like to ask Vicki Murphy to come up. She volunteered to lead this effort off, and she'll show some slides and explain what's happening in municipal utilities.
Good evening. Just going to go through the sanitary, the electric, the power utility fund, and the water fund tonight. This first one, this shows you our the sanitary sewers. This is also actually run by Mike Talbot's group, and the green is the theoretical, and this is for the quarter, that first one that you see with the 3 colors. So at the first quarter, theoretically, we should be at $156,725. The red is actual and encumbered, and the blue is actual. So our actual is under the theoretical. If you don't mind, I'm just going to go through right to the next one and stop me if you have questions. Sorry, I was showing you the wrong one, but there's the one I just explained. The next one is the sewage treatment fund, and again, the same thing. Blue is actual, red is the encumbered, and plus the actual, and the green is the theoretical, and that's first quarter. You can see we're good in that one. And then in the revenue, we just did the actual and theoretical. We are under the actual, mostly probably because we don't post for the full first quarter. I took this right off the Munis system on like October 1st and 2nd, so some of the money was not posted yet. Okay, the next one I'm going to go through is the power utility fund, and I'll explain a couple of these here. But the first one is the electric generation facility, which is really the facility up on the hill, the methane facility. And it shows that we're above the theoretical, but I remind you that the total budget on this is $700,000, but it was supposed to be budgeted at 1.1 to actually cover our costs. that we have to pay Auburn Energy. So we are going to be worse in each of the next months. And you'll see that when we come back each month, I'm going to do it by the month.
Would you explain that a little bit, Beck?
Yeah, and I apologize, I wasn't here during the budget time, but I had originally put in our budget for this fund. It was supposed to be, I'm going to say, between 1.1 and 1.2 million. And something happened when I was gone that they only funded it for 700,000. So this is going to trend above where the theoretical shows, because you only have $700,000 in the budget.
Who funded it? You're saying somebody?
It could have been our previous comptroller. I wasn't here, so the numbers I gave both the comptroller and the city manager were between 1.1 and 1.2 for the total budget for this fund. And when I got back from, again, I apologize, I was on vacation, and it had been cut to the 700,000. So this is going to trend above.
Now, the 1.1 includes what?
It includes, there's about an $87,000 payment per month that we send to Auburn Energy. And we also have to pay for all the oil and greases that we use up there. Plus, there is some operating funds. There is some electricity that we have to use. It goes back to it. There is some parts and materials that we have to, we maintain the line and the disconnect. So there is some operating cost to this other than just paying Auburn Energy.
So what you're saying is we're going to be 400,000 short just because it wasn't budgeted properly, correct?
If we continue to trend what we're doing right now, if something happens before then, and maybe that's why you cut it, is because we are in negotiations right now with Auburn Energy, so that payment of $87,000 per month may be reduced. So maybe that's why it happened. I, again, was not here, so.
Do you have any, can you shed any light on that, Doug?
The only thing that, and we would need to look into it, is whether that $2.5 million transfer, part of that was supposed to cover a deficit this year, 500,000 of that. So we just need to take a close look at that and make sure.
So could we get a follow-up on that next week?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, this next one, you'll see it's way out of whack, but I'll explain this. I took it off of Munis. The actual plus encumbered, this is a capital project got in here, and it needs to be removed and put in, and I think I've already sent it to Bob, and so he would take that whole red line out of there, and it would just be the blue. Again, it belongs in a capital project. So the blue is where we are, and the reason that we're higher than where we should be is, as you know, we've had to do some major repairs to that North Street Division dam, or not dam, I'm sorry, to the hydro. And we actually will need to do more, so this is going to, again, it's going to continue to trend up. And then the last one is the revenue fund, and way under, but mostly because we don't post the wastewater treatment revenue, which is our highest revenue. Until last year, I don't think we did it till the end of the year. I could, if you'd like, estimate what it would be per month or per quarter and put that in there. I can actually look at what it is and then put it in there, but we don't post it till the end of the year is what we did last year.
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
Or I can have Bob probably post it or
Sure.
take it out of our fund. And the last one is the water fund. And the first one there is your utility billing, and I apologize, I for some reason used blue as theoretical on this one. And as you see, the encumbered and actual is the same as the actual, so we're under that. Source of supply, this is the pumping stations, and again, we're under the theoretical. Water filtration, we are, again, both under the theoretical for that for the first quarter. And finally, transmission and, I'm sorry, there's two more. Transmission and distribution, we are under for actual, but Mike's actual and encumbered, and that's probably because of, he has a, I guess you call him, can't think of the name, but it doesn't mean he's ordered it yet, but it's like he has a blanket order for certain companies that we're probably going to order materials from, but they aren't ordered yet. So actual spending is under. And finally, the revenue, and again, it is under, and that could be because of the posting. And again, I took it off of October 1st, 2nd, and we didn't have the total quarter in there. Are there any questions on any of these funds? Thank you.
If there are no questions for Vicki, the other department that volunteered to come up this evening is planning, and Jenny Haynes is here.
I want to give a thanks to Vicki for being the model for us to follow with these graphs. Definitely appreciate that. I'm going to lead with code enforcement instead of planning because I wanted to talk to you about the impact that the fee schedule changes for building permits show you that for the first quarter. So that's what you're seeing here. Move it up a little bit. Again, the green bars are, if you take what we budgeted for revenue, which was $229,000 approximately, and divide it by 12, that's where we should be hitting. The blue line is last fiscal year first quarter revenue, and the red line is this fiscal year first quarter revenue. So you see we are at a little over $84,000 for the first quarter. That's almost $27,000 more in revenue for the Code Enforcement Office. And just so you know what we're tracking with that revenue. That's our grass, trash, and snow contracts paying back. That's electrical licenses, plumbing licenses, certificates of occupancy, building permits, demolition permits, zoning permits, and plumbing permits. But by far, the reason for that difference is the building permits there. So it's a couple things that provided that impact. One was the changes you made in the fee schedule specifically for commercial permits. And there were a couple of large projects that pulled permits in the first quarter. So that's why we're seeing that. So we're looking forward to continuing watching that. Any questions on that one? Okay, and then this is code enforcement expenditures in the first quarter. Again, green lines, if you take the budget, divide it by 12, you'll see that the blue bar is our actual expenses, so under the budget. And the red line is, like Vicki's graphs, actual plus encumbered, meaning the POs, the purchase orders that we put in place at the beginning of the year. We have a lease for the copier, we have grass, trash, and snow contracts, things like that, that we issue purchase orders at the beginning of the year in order to pay those. Okay, and then the planning office. Again, same deal, green is budget. Blue is actual, and red is with our purchase orders. We are trending under in both cases. That is mainly because of the senior planner vacancy that we continue to have in our office. If you look at the budget detail, which I know you have, you'll see that I'm trending high on my services line. That's because of the services that we're contracting right now for physical planning that we need in order to make sure our planning board projects continue. Any questions? Thanks.
Jenny, just going back, and this has been brought up before with code enforcement, and we're looking at doing some online services. Doug, can you tell us, or Jenny, the progress of that?
We're waiting for the vendor to respond. We've provided all information that they've requested, so we're waiting for Viewpoint to come back to us with I guess it's a schedule now. They've assigned a project manager, and anything to add, Jenny?
No, they had asked us for information on number of users and some other detail. We provided that probably at least 3 weeks ago, Billy. We have the signed contracts back from the vendor, and we're waiting for some more information from them to get started.
Jenny, can you briefly describe that project?
Sure. What we're going to be able to do with, it's called View Permit, is the new software that we're going to be putting in place. We're going to be able to issue building permits online. And the idea is to be able to do that so that you can do it from home and be able to pay for it from home. We also will have the new software in the office so that if you come in and ask for a permit at the counter, it will be in the same software. Code enforcement officers will have the software in the field with them so that they can use both the historical permit information, violation information while they are in the field. The idea also is to ultimately make sure that variances from the zoning board and planning board are all in place. Our historic district approvals are in place so that when they're sitting there in the car, they have all the information they need. It's also going to track our certificate of occupancy inspections, our violations, all of that will be in there by property in order to have the data all in one place instead of having to go to 3 or 4 different files to get it. So it's going to be more user-friendly from the public side and definitely more efficient for us. It's going to be for sure a heavy lift getting it going. We have some paper-based and some computer-based systems, so it's kind of merging it all into one and getting it going.
And it is 24/7, correct?
Yes.
So at any time during the day or night, you can get a permit?
Right. Well, just to make sure everybody understands, if you push submit, it's not going to spit a permit back out at you because Brian and his guys are going to have to review that. But what will happen is they'll be able to review that online and then, be able to get it back to the person.
So is there any movement into trying to get the office, and this is for you also, Doug, to get the office opened more than 2 days a week so that it is accessible to the public like I've been talking about many times in the past?
I would love to do that. Filling the keyboard specialist position would do that for sure.
And there's nobody in City Hall that we could train to fill in a day a week or 2 days a week to get that office opened?
We really don't have anybody that's got the right job description that's available. Jenny badgers me all the time about opening the office.
She's getting tired of me.
She's a big advocate for it.
What job description would you be talking about?
Well, it's a keyboard specialist.
Okay, and they could go into any department, right? According to civil service, it's not job specific.
But it's a matter of their availability from another department.
And we don't have anybody that could do that at all.
I guess what I would say is there's capacity issues. Doug is sharing his assistant with another department.
Mm-hmm.
My assistant is part-time. The treasurer's office lost a position. So people that may have been available a year ago at this time, we just don't have them. So I would love to have that position back, absolutely.
Now, Doug, you were talking about putting a kiosk in to the online stuff.
Yeah, and I think that will allow people who may not have a computer who come to City Hall to do a transaction right here. So,
Well,
So I'm going to just request one thing if I can. You can give me a list of all the positions that are keyboard specialists in the city and what they do for next
Sure.
meeting, or provide counsel
I asked for
with
that too. Yeah.
So I'd like to see what's happening here. I think we got to get more involved and see what's going on here firsthand so that at least council can get a view of what's happening here, because I think some things need to get changed. And we need to be involved in that process.
Well, I think there's going to be some growing pains with this software, obviously. I mean, you just heard Jenny saying, well, there's going to be training issues, I'm sure, and then as things roll out, it's going to, look at the Affordable Health Care Act, how bad that came out. That hopefully the rollout of this will be much, much smoother. This is software, it works 24/7. It doesn't take a salary, it doesn't retire, it doesn't get sick. So once this is up and going, it's really going to be basically automating a position that was in place. And we won't need to put an individual there. That's the whole purpose of this software.
You're still going to need a human individual in that office, Counselor. There's no way you're getting around it. You got to have accessibility to the general public. There's people out there that don't know how to use a computer. And you need to make sure that there's a human element that's there and accessible to the public.
Well, there is going to be a kiosk here, and I'm sure that there'll be somebody there if someone really can't.
Well, if the office
Work
is
it.
closed, how's anybody going to be there?
Well, I really think that you're overestimating the computer illiterate
No, I'm not,
population
but
here.
Jenny just told you that it's going to take Brian and somebody to review that permit, and it's going to take a while to spit it out. So the office is being closed, you're not going to have that readily available. So we need to look at, I
The
agree
desk
with
is
you. I
closed,
agree with you. We need to move into the modern age of
Well, the counter's
doing
closed,
things
but the
more
guys behind,
efficiently.
working behind there are there every day.
But you still need the human element, you still need that office to be opened.
Mr. Hicks, did you want to say something?
With the computer, the online 24/7, someone still has to take the information that comes in. The computer is not going to do the complete permit package review. Somebody still needs to do that. You need a body, you need a brain, you need someone that can review that. This comes in 24/7. It's not doing that now when we're backed up. We are running probably about 16 days on some of your more in-depth permit applications. Some of them we try to turn around at the counter. That's the whole idea of the counter. Public, eye to eye. I understand what you're explaining to me, and we can work it out then and there. Most people come in, they have to get an insurance certificate. We walk them through the application process to get their CE 200 through the state. They walk up to that laptop, they're dumbfounded. They don't have a clue to where to get started. My secretary, Lane Paulsley, or myself will go around the counter, we'll work with them so that they can get their application in. What are they going to do at home? They're just going to become more frustrated with the whole process. And then when they find out it didn't kick it back, because that's what they're believing, that it's going to kick it right back. My order's been shipped. That's what they're used to. This is not the way it's going to work. This is my frustration with this process.
I think ultimately, overall, the software is gonna give us efficiencies. So, you know, is it, in my opinion, and obviously Brian's opinion, it's not gonna replace that keyboard specialist position. There's still a lot of clerical work that has to happen with that. But, you know, I appreciate the discussion about it for sure.
But I agree with Councilor Camardo. If we can get that list of people with that training, I'd like to see it.
Town clerk, I believe the title was, wasn't it?
Yep.
Town clerk. Keyboard
Keyboard specialist, thank you.
Are we still on department heads, or you got another presentation?
Jenny,
Well,
one second, gentlemen, please. You all set, Jenny?
All set, thank you.
Thank you. Please.
If there were other questions, other department heads are here this evening to speak to their budgets.
I'd just like to have a few comments here, if I could. I'd like to see us do something a little differently here. These graphs are fine, but I think we really got to get into the meat and potatoes of the budget process. And I think we need to challenge, last year I asked the department heads to really look at your budgets and come forth with some good cost-cutting measures, because this year is going to be another very difficult year as we move forward into the budget process. We need to look at the revenue side, especially things as you talked about with the police department, Doug, receiving some revenues there with the parking enforcement or ticket enforcement, but we really got to start looking at, and if we can start giving ourselves a threshold of 10, 12% in each department. I know that's very hard to do because we've cut in the past quite a bit, but these are very difficult times. We got to look at every penny we spend, and it's got to start with the department heads in every department. So I think if we can move in those areas and we can take a department head every couple of weeks here and really start looking at all of the dollars we spend in those departments and how we can come up with cost savings is something that we really should be looking to do with the time we're spending with each department. So I would like to try to go in that area if possible, if we could.
Well, if we could just see numbers so we can see if items are trending high or if they're trending low, and just have responses and explanations as to why that may be. So that is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure that we're coming up with, it's not going to be try to do this at the last minute where we're coming up with $1 million or $2 million
No, that's why
worth of
I'm
cuts.
saying
And I think it's...
we need to see the trends now.
I want to get some input from the department heads. I want to give them the opportunity to do it so it doesn't fall on council's, we're not doing it the last minute. They're involved in it. They're the professionals here. They run their departments every day. And I think I'd like to see that give and take a little bit if we possibly could. Please.
I think we're all agreeing on the same
Sure.
thing, just the format is
Yep.
to how we go about it and how it's presented.
We want to see expenditures.
Right,
the
revenue,
expenditures and revenues,
and I
right.
want to see some cuts, but I don't want to
With
see...
the overtime in each department,
Yeah.
let's see it.
And I don't want to see somebody come here and say, okay, I got to cut my department 10%. We're going to cut this out completely. We're going to cut that out completely. I want to look for cost savings that we can live with, that we can move forward with, and really take the time to put into the process of doing that.
So you want to see a more detailed report?
More detailed, and I want to see more input from the department heads on how they're going to get to those cuts that we need to make.
I could use some guidance then. What we gave you at the beginning of the month was very detailed, 70 pages of line item budget with, year-to-date expenditures. What we tried to do this evening was to summarize at a higher level the overall department trend for the first quarter. And it's difficult because the first quarter, everything's just settling in. But I thought a graphical presentation would help the public understand where we're at and make it easier for the council to see if trends are below where we think they might be or they're high and what corrective action might need to be taken if revenues are low, early in the year, or expenditures are higher than we anticipate.
Doug, what do you expect the deficit's going to be with the budget process this year? You got any rough idea?
Well, we know at this point that we're paying about $60,000 a month in overtime that we hadn't budgeted for one department. So that's...
I know at one time you said it was about $2.5 million. You're roughly estimating a deficit of next year?
Could be more than that.
Going into next year's budget, yes.
Yeah.
Now,
So,
you recall that, again, from our previous presentation, the department heads did a very good job of cutting costs last year.
Absolutely, but we got to do it again this year, unfortunately. We got to try to do it because the point I think I'm looking to make here is if we're looking at almost a $3 million deficit, we got over a $30 million budget, that's 10%. I want to see us at least come back with some 10% costs in departments. I know it's painful, I know it's hard to do, but it's something that we got to start early and try to get it done. So that we can have open discussion on where we want to go and what we actually want to cut. But I think it's good that the department heads would make some recommendations at this early stage to start moving forward with it.
Some of those recommendations, I'm afraid, would entail service delivery cuts, which I would like council feedback before we develop those.
I'm sorry, Doug, say again.
Some of those cuts are frankly, that deep. We're going to have to cut service. I mean, an example is what's happened in codes right now with the counter being open 2 days a week. An example is my office having a secretary only part of the day and shared with civil service the rest of the day. Those kind of things have already hit us, and deeper cuts, we'll see more of that kind of thing. So I don't want to come to the council and throw things at you that are totally unworkable from your point of view.
No, so. I agree. You need to look at where the most fat is in the departments, and that's not in planning and that's not in the codes department. So you need to look where the highest amount of the tax revenue goes to. That's where you start. You start where the meat is.
Every department can take cuts, there's no question about it, but I'm talking about going line by line and trying to cut some expenditures out. And if you need help doing that, I'd be happy to offer my expertise in that area if there's any, but I'd be happy to go line by line and look at that. That's something that needs to happen. That's how we need to get through this process that's going to happen in a couple months. I know it's not an easy thing to do. It's going to be a very difficult situation, but maybe we need to start looking at zero-based budgeting in every department. Go from there and really look and see what we need to do and how we need to move forward with it. But these discussions have got to happen. They got to happen now. We can't keep putting it off.
Again, this comes back to the restructuring. That's what it comes back to. 73% of our cost is labor. So that's why the restructuring of, obviously it's a hot topic, but the restructuring of the fire department's got to be done.
Yeah, but
I mean, half of their costs, $4.5 million, is labor. I mean,
They got to be done in an analytical way, Counselor. As you know, there's contracts in line. We can't have it cost us more money to go down a path, because right now it's running about $60,000 a month in overtime. Plus, we haven't even talked about the legal bills that are involved in that. But
if you don't address it, you're going to continue the problem.
But we need to negotiate. We got to start talking about that right now. We got to look at it, and we got to see how we're going to get out of some of these.
The answer is not cutting paper clips. All right, it's not cutting how much printing paper each department has. You got to look where the fat is, and that's where you got to trim.
The answer is looking at doing the best we can and cutting expenditures everywhere. And if including paper clips, maybe that needs to be looked at.
I don't disagree, but let's start where the biggest payment goes to. I mean, you have $800,000 just in salaries to lieutenants. That's something you got to restructure. And you've said that. I mean, you've agreed with that too. I mean, the restructuring of that department.
We need to look at everything. I'm not ruling anything out at all. It's a very difficult times that we're in, but it's an opportune time for us also. You know, hopefully we can get through some of these difficult times. I don't want to look at doom and gloom out there. I want to look at it as an opportunity to right-size the city so we can move forward, we can provide services in an effective and efficient manner. And I think it's an opportunity for us, as I said.
I agree.
before.
I agree with you. Right-sizing that's exactly what we need to be doing.
The other thing is, you know, with the constraints that we have with the property tax cap, we cannot go over that property tax cap. We have to live within that property tax cap. I don't know of anybody that will want to go over that property tax cap. How many more people will we chase out of this city? It's very important that we do everything we can to live within that property tax cap, and it's going to cost some discomfort. We're going to have some pain. It's no way about it, but it's going to impact the service.
You're right. You cannot tax.
You can't tax your way out of this.
Right.
It's going to come down to contracts with the unions.
It's going to come down to contracts, and it's going to come down to levels and service accordingly. I mean, there's the needed services, the would like to have services, and the luxuries. We have to categorize those and determine, let's focus more on the actual needs, maybe cut back on some of the needs and eliminate the luxuries. That's, I mean, let's face it, you run a household budget, what's the first thing you give up is, you know, going out to eat once or twice a week, things like this. The luxuries, things that you can live well without. And again, the labor costs are according to the level of services.
The city government has got to match the city's ability to pay for it.
Exactly.
Bottom line. That's how every household runs. That's how every private business runs. Okay, it's just basic arithmetic.
To say that you just want to, keep things status quo, or let's say, oh, well, let's negotiate our way out of this. Well, you can only do a certain level of negotiation. There's a nice thing that the state gives us as a gift. It's called binding arbitration. Truly, this next year's council's biggest task is going to be wrestling. That's the elephant in the room, is keeping and fixing the structural issues. We've got a structural issue in the city. There's no secret about it. We've talked about it for well over a year now. 2 years. Yeah, okay, I stand corrected. The best analogy is the one that I heard before, and I got a credit bill with this, is you go to Wegmans with $30 in your hand and you put $40 on the belt. What do they tell you at the end of the register? What do you want? You got to put $10 back and you pick. So it's much the same as like Counselor Smith said, it's how you would run your own household. I don't know of anybody in a household that would spend more than they take in. They wouldn't last very long. I mean, they would be in bankruptcy. That's the hard facts. I mean, we have a structural imbalance, and we have to address it. And we got to live within a property tax cap. It's not an easy thing.
Mr. Selby, you have the floor.
Well, the next two items, if the council would like, because I know it's running late and I know there's a request for executive session, we can bring those back next week. We have a fairly light agenda next week. That would be the land.
Doug, on the series, on the sales tax, I mean, you got series 1, 2, and 3. There's no explanation of what those series are.
It's not colored.
And it's not in color. Well, you know, I mean, you can kind of figure out.
Yeah, we do need to do some work on some of those. We were trying to get as many of them done as we could for this evening, so we'll work on the formatting.
That's agreeable, council, then?
Yes.
To eliminate the last two. Very good. Other business for council?
Just, if I, just said, if we can, with the Economic Development Committee, I know myself and Councilor Ezeki have some candidates, and I hope we can get that seated shortly, so if we could give Doug the names for the...
I believe I gave him.
Yeah, I gave him my names. I gave him months ago.
Yeah, right after.
So we're all set with that, Doug, then? Oh, we should be all set then?
That's the business committee.
Business, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm, yep. And just the other thing that Doug, I had given you last week, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, we had a little bit of unfinished business here at the council, like contracts and things like that we're following up on with meetings with the county and so on and so forth. Could you give us an update on that maybe next week?
Sure.
I gave you 5 or 6 different things last week or 2 weeks ago.
One other thing that has been brought to my attention, and Doug, I kind of had a little email traffic with you on this, is the folks on South Street regarding the Case Mansion issue. I met with them this past Sunday, and regardless of, you know, whatever anybody's opinion about it, the whole situation is, there's been a determination by the zoning board, and have they appealed? Their appeal ran out, or their timeline ran out, I believe, yesterday?
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
I need to check with Mr. Fusco. We were expecting letters from both the attorney for the church and the attorney for the ministry.
Okay, well, that being said, these residents are asking for what's going to happen here now. The non-conforming use is continuing. They're not happy about it. The zoning board has made a determination on this, and one of the notes that they got, at least from a phone conversation, and I hope it was a misunderstanding, is that Mr. Fusco said that the city's enforcement of the zoning board ruling is discretionary, and I explained to him, I said, I certainly hope and believe that that's more than likely a misunderstanding. But anyways, they want to know what's going to happen now. If no letters have been received and things like that, the zoning has to be enforced. If we don't do this, why do we even have a zoning board? I mean, just let everybody do whatever they want then. I mean, that's...
The bottom line, the zoning board's decision is binding, correct?
Exactly. And it's enforceable.
Right.
And we need to enforce the laws that are on our books.
Well, that's it. If you don't like the laws, you change the laws, but you live with the laws.
I spoke to Mr. Fusco about that statement. He did not make that statement.
I understand it. That's why I told him, I said, I explained it to him that they more than likely had a misunderstanding. I said, I don't know of anybody that would say that. But what I do believe is that they are deeply concerned. They spent a lot of money and time and blood, sweat, and tears on bringing this through the court system, and the zoning board has made a determination, and all they're asking now is that the law be enforced. That's the bottom line. And I think that's a pretty reasonable request.
follow through on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you had some conversations with somebody from South Street this week, too,
I
didn't you,
did.
Doug? Yeah.
I did. And I tried to explain to her the circumstances, and I owe her a phone call tomorrow. So,
Recap?
I'm sorry, one other thing. I just want to know, how did the meeting go with the folks on Franklin Street? I see Billy's still alive, so.
He's not walking with a limp.
Fortunately, the meeting was 3 to 7, and I didn't get there till 4 o'clock because my secretary came in on her vacation to get some business done. I guess some of the people had some real concerns about how the buses were going to get in, what driveway, how where the work zone was be. The same woman that was here before was there and had her concerns about the lack of communication before and the short notice of the meeting, but I explained to her again that we weren't going to have a meeting if we didn't have any answers to the questions they're going to give us, and basically I can't comment about the contractor schedule until he gave it to us, and as soon as he gave it to us, 2 days later, we're already had a meeting already set up. Some people were concerned, and I kind of throw you guys under the bus. They wanted to know what happened to their crossing guard on Seward and Franklin, and I says, well, during the budget process, they had to cut down the amount of money that they had available for the crossing guards, and I says, you'll have to take that up with the mayor and the council. That's not my bailiwick here of information. So you might get a couple phone calls on that. We also mentioned to the people that we would have another meeting again Monday, and this time we're going to meet at the college has been generous to let us use that nice, beautiful round building in the front. I guess they call it the Business and Industrial Center, the BIC. I didn't know that, so we're going to have it at the BIC from 3 to 7. Again, we'll probably have anybody that couldn't make the last one. I mean, there was valid concerns how we're with the work zone. We also mentioned that we'll always go eastbound, and only the area the block that we're probably working is the only area that will probably be one-way eastbound. The rest of it, the areas to the right and the left, or east or west of that, will still have two-way traffic as always. They wanted to know, are we going to kind of make the safe when the contractor is going to take a 2-week Christmas, New Year time off for his employees, and then we'll be back on the job, and there are questions were we going to leave all the excavations wide open, and I says, no, I think we'll fill them up before we break for the 2-week period. Again, we had the interest there of keeping the site as safely as possible. The contractor, based on Monday's meeting with the school board, they had told us what time the buses come in and out. Contractor said he'll make sure that he isn't digging in front of their driveway at those appointed times. The school also gave us some calendars that has all of the school schedule in there. So whatever we can do to minimize working in front of their place, maybe we can, when we do that valve, we can do it on one of the days they have off for one of the holidays or something. So, I mean, the contractor, Rizzo Construction, will try to do everything he can to make it as inconvenient to the people as possible. But, I mean, it's construction.
Bill, are people going to get new curbs? I was asked, after last week's meeting, I had received a phone call over the weekend, and they were wondering if they were going to get new curbs.
Actually, this contract, as you realize, there is no federal state funding on this. This is our own taxpayer money, dollar for dollar. I've got to be as frugal and as tight as possible. Anybody's curb that is disturbed will be fixed. Anybody's driveway approach that is disturbed, we will repair them. There's like 2 blocks that we're going underneath the south sidewalk. Of course, we'll be replacing all of that sidewalk. We will put everything back as good as we possibly can, if not better. And then we were lucky that your body has approved paving it from curb to curb. So when this project's all done, it should look a lot better than it is today. But as far as giving free curb out, that's, unless you guys direct me to, I have no plans on doing that. I'm trying to keep this total budget down as close as I can to, what we have in the contract.
Thank you.
Oh, you got me off. I'd have to look it up. It's whatever you guys approved.
With the homeowners?
Bill, I hate to take, is it possible for, if a bunch of homeowners are contiguous and would like a curb, is it possible for them to approach the contractor and get some kind of
Yes,
better price, I guess, for an individual curb? I mean, they may, if they, let's say if they can get it at some level of a discount because of such a long run of it, they may take advantage of it.
I'm glad you brought that up. As a standard policy on all our sidewalk and road programs, I write a letter to every homeowner telling them that we're going to be working on the street, and that if they would like to, we'll can put a sidewalk or a curb, and they can go under the revolving loan program where they can spread it on their taxes over a 5-year period, plus 6% interest and a one-time charge of $25. I did not do that on this Franklin Street project, but if you're agreeable, I'll be more than happy to send those letters out, and we'll contact all the homeowners, and if they would like to put in any new curb that we aren't disturbing, then we'll be glad to do it, and I could do the same thing for the sidewalks. If that's your wish, I'd be I'll work on that next week.
I would think that that
I think it's a good idea.
May want to take advantage of that, but the other thing is if you've got, let's say, I'm going to say a couple blocks worth of curb to put in, rather than a price that for a small section of curb versus a longer section of curb. I know the price per piece doesn't change much, but I mean, if just simply because they can go along and set it up, I mean, there's no, I'm going to say setup charge is what I'm going to call it for lack of
mobilization, demobilization.
Yeah. So if they're already mobilized, I mean, they may be able to take advantage of some level of savings over having it set as an individual. I mean, if they're continuous, it's much more effective for the contractor to go ahead and set a string of curb rather than stitching it.
So is that all right?
Is
Then
there enough money in the escrow to cover that, if Bill? Or
actually, I think the city manager and Christina Selvik, myself, met, and we have about $200,000 available for sidewalks and curb out of the existing fiscal year. And again, come July 1st, the people that were in the program 5 years ago will make it a payment, and 4 years ago, 3. So we should probably be in good shape to offer putting that on their taxes as well.
I think it makes sense because they may just say, well, let's do it. They may be agreeable.
I will send those. We'll start sending those letters out next week.
As long as they're aware that it's on their dime.
Yeah, but
oh yes.
Well, the letter will say that, I'm sure.
No, I want to reinsure that, Counselor.
Yeah, because I mean, if they, they're digging a street, they may not even think that they want that until they, say, oh, geez, maybe I wanted it.
Right.
And this letter may give them an incentive, and actually a curb is actually better for the road.
Oh, it definitely is.
Because it provides guidance for the water so it doesn't go underneath the pavement. I mean, it's actually beneficial.
It definitely is. Okay.
Recap.
I can't remember what this means. Oh, Councilor Camardo asked for a list of keyboard specialist positions in City Hall. Councilor Camardo also asked that the business committee be appointed, then if the names are all in, if they aren't, if everybody would submit their names. Councilor Camardo asked for an update on various outstanding contracts with the county. That's right?
No, there was about 6 different items that I went over
last week.
2 weeks ago,
2 weeks.
I think it was, yeah.
Okay.
Just to follow up on those,
Gotcha.
please.
And Councilor Zika asked for an update on the zoning board decision regarding the Case Mansion and enforcement. That's it.
Is that correct, Counsel? Yes. Very good. I understand there's a request for executive session, Mr. Rossi?
Yes, Your Honor. There's one dealing with contracts and another one dealing with land sales.
Very good. This time entertain a motion for executive session.
I'd like to add the potential litigation and personnel issue and on that as well.
That too,
Mhm.
litigation and personnel?
Yes.
Okay.
Very good. Entertain a motion for executive session. Counselor Camardo, seconded by Counselor Rozika. Please call the roll.
Counselor Graney?
Yes.
Counselor Camardo?
Yes.
Counselor Smith?
Aye.
Counselor Rozika?
Yes.
Mayor Quill?
Aye.